This is Between Hook Sets. I'm Jason Walter from In Through the Outdoors with my partner in slime, Kurt Underhill from the fishing crew.
Reminds me when we were kids, one of us sit on the couch like with a boat, we threw our fishing rod out, and then the other person would lay on the carpet. That's how we pass a cold winter day.
You didn't warn him that I might.
No, I didn't. I warned Aaron that you might get hit. All I could think is your arm is going to fall off with all the hook sets today. You do.
It's going to get tired today. There's no doubt about it. Well, we are lucky enough to have Jason Mitchell here. I texted you for a picture because we're going to talk about Devil's Lake. We gotta include Jason, right?
I was going to say surprise. He wasn't on our media list, but you can't come here without talking to Jason Mitchell, and been doing it a long time. Kind of like evolutionized what's going on here in a way, and in a lot of products in the industry. I mean, you've been a very influential person in this industry. And kind of, what's your backstory? We've had you on before, but what's your backstory and how did you get here and how did you become what you are? I mean,
now, wait a minute. Now, when we talk about backstory, I want you to go back to that old pickup that you came to Devil's Lake in, right?
Oh, goodness.
Right? I mean, go back. Is that go back too far?
No, I mean,
okay.
Goodness. I mean, I grew up fishing the Missouri River as a kid, and we'd come over here once in a while, but, this is a long way. This is like an hour and a half where, it's 45 minutes from the east end of Secaucus. So that's where I did most of my fishing or even the tail race. But, I came over here and I was like a cat. I just stayed. I've been here ever since.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you made this lake your own.
Back then, there weren't hardly any guides on the lake. I mean, there was less than a half a dozen guides on the lake, and very few. There's only one guy that I knew of that was, like active going every day. The rest of the guys are more, part time. And Woodland Resort felt like they needed another guide, and so I so where this new building is, this beautiful lodge that they built. It used to be the old lodge was underwater. Then they moved it to the edge of the lake here. That would have been underwater now. And there was a bunch of trees here, and there was a camper. And I had about 300 feet of extension cord. No air conditioning. So I remember just hating 4th of July because I always have to have the windows open at night. People would be lighting fireworks till midnight or later, and I'd have to get up and fish the next day.
You have the sounds, the smells, everything. Yeah,
but
because 4th of July in a camper with the windows closed ain't fun either. But
no. Yeah, so it was. I've been here ever since, and goodness, I was so young back then. I didn't have any bills. I had no expectations I had no quality of life expectations. Like if I could have made a deal with the devil back then, where hey, you can have a nice boat, a nice pickup, and fish every day, but you'll be poor and broke the rest of your life, I would have signed up. I mean, that's all I want to do is fish.
See, now everybody's laughing at me. I sold my house, and I have a tiny cabin to live on Lake Ponset. It is 10 by 16, and I've got a shower, and I've got a crapper. So it can be done, right?
Right. I had to bring it up. There's a new backdrop for the Between Hook Sets.
Right there. Wow. But I mean, I just wanted to fish every day. I mean, I didn't want anything else. It's all I cared about. It's all I thought about. In looking back, as far as guiding, I just found that I had the right temperament for it. I guess there's people that were, I would say were way better anglers than I was. They were more thorough. Maybe they took a little bit more, they're more particular about their equipment, different things. Whereas I think I just had the right temperament when some 76-year-old woman can't stand up in the seat and she cranks that bottom bouncer right up to the rod tip and expects you to net a 25-inch walleye, and the rod breaks and the fish gets off, and I'm just, it's okay. I was laid back. Yeah. And I think that's what got me through. That was my superpowers. I didn't lose it because I'd hire all my buddies were phenomenal fishermen, and some of them were great guides, and some of them were horrible guides. And that was kind of the thing, is that some of the best fishermen were just wound up a little bit too much to deal with all the stuff that goes wrong with fishing with people that fish once a year in some cases.
First trip ever.
Well, in some cases, yeah.
So let me say this to you, Brad Durick. You were one of those guys that wasn't very good, and that's why you're catfishing and not doing the walleye thing.
So before we get off, like, that was a great thing you said, because this last week I went to 2 kids' graduations, both hardcore fishermen. You probably know the one, Bo Schilling, Chad Schilling's kid.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I literally took them fishing rods for their graduation present and said, here you go.
Yeah.
So Bo and Hank Asher, like, I asked Hank, what's your plan? He goes, well, I'm going to go to online school and I'm going to fish.
Yeah.
And I'm going to fish. And that's what I'm going to do. And he goes, and then I'm going to get I'm going to go to college. I'm going to become a PE teacher, because his mom, Emily, who is a music teacher and guides all summer, he goes, it's worked out pretty well for her. So I'm going to follow in the same footsteps. But going to that, as looking back on yourself as a young man moving up to Devil's Lake and living in a camper, what would you give those young kids that just graduated a tip that maybe if somebody had given you could have been that moment in life at that moment that would have, like you said, you sold your soul to the devil for a pickup in a boat? I think they're in the same boat.
I don't think I would have. I would have sold a lot more than that. I would have gave up anything.
But what I'm saying is, like, those kids are probably sitting in that same boat as you coming up here. And, you know, so talk about, like, what would you give them a piece of advice?
Well, I guess one thing I would say is that the beauty of this industry, and I love seeing kids and young people, you know, becoming part of this industry. I mean, this industry has created an incredible life for me, you know, and you know, there's negativity and cynicalism, especially, like, you know, whether it's on the bass tournament scene or whatever, where people, the old joke, how do you make $1 million in the fishing industry? You start out with 2 million. Like, well, I didn't have 2 quarters to rub together. You know, if you're a poor business person, you're a poor business person. You're going to fail in whatever you do. It's just that fishing's a little harder. Right?
Yeah, right.
And so I feel like you got to be on your A game, because it is such a fun passion project that there's a lot of people that'll do it for part-time for free, or just, you know, they want to be around it. With that being said, there's a lot of different formulas. There's not one size fits all. I think ultimately you can just be the best version of yourself and just do you really well and be successful. I mean, you look at all the different personalities, and that's what it is in a lot of cases, you know, different personalities. You have to be authentic. I think people can pick that out, you know, in a nanosecond if you're not authentic. And I tell people this, and maybe I'm wrong, but you know, I feel like I've been taking the lunch from trust babies my entire life. Okay, mom and dad have a huge business. Junior's an absolute failure. They pay his entry fee, so they keep him away from the business. You know, those people don't scare me at all.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting your lunch. You
Yeah.
know? Right. Yeah. I mean,
Right.
You know, when you're living in a camper without air conditioning, you know, it's a whole different animal. Right? So,
You don't go back to your fancy cush hotel. Or your fancy
don't have
cush
no
cabin.
credit card, and you know, how many clown scatter apps do you have? I'll take all of them. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, no, no. But with that being said, you do have to have the passion, and obviously you do have to work hard. You have to become savvy with business, and I enjoy business. To me, business is like fishing.
Yeah.
Like trying to figure out a pattern, trying to catch a fish, getting your hands on that fish. I mean, it's just like business deals, and in learning. I mean, business is so much like fishing that if you love to fish, you know, there's a lot of things about business you'll probably enjoy. But and I tell people this, that I feel like, you know, this is a long game. Okay. And a lot of people come and go, and they come and go fairly quickly. When you look at, you know, say if somebody wants to be in this industry for 50 years, you know, they last for 2 or 3 years and they're gone. And I always tell people there's so many people that get in this industry because they're in love with themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, right.
They're just in love with themselves. Like, and here's the thing is, like, with a TV show, I mean, I don't need attention. Like, I don't do this because I want to be on TV. I just love to fish. And television enabled me to provide a living for my family, because I also, as I got older, I realized how great it is to be a dad and a husband. And I didn't want to get cheated out of those things just because I was a fishing bum. And so, you know, you get a little older, let's go, now I got to make enough money to provide for a family. There's nothing wrong with, you know, going through life and realizing, you know what, I want to make some money, you know, because if you're fishing a lot and you're gone all the time, there's no woman in the world that's going to put up with you fishing every day and not making a living.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta, you know, and that's how we justified, is that my wife got to stay home and raise her kids. You know, I tried to be the best dad I could be when I was home. But there's times when I'm gone 4 or 5 days in a row. I'm over in Minnesota filming or whatever. And, you know, and if you're doing all that stuff, you you gotta make sure the bills are
paid, and mama's happy.
Yeah,
right?
and so you got to make a living. And so getting back, people that are so in love with themselves, and I get to see a lot because going back, having a TV show, I can't tell you how many times. Put it this way: I attract weird people like light attracts moths.
So what are you saying about
He looked right at me when he said that.
No, I'm talking about a guy that comes up to you at a sports show and they're standing this far away
Yeah,
from
right.
you. I should be doing what you're doing, and you need to film with me. I always catch limits of 8-pound walleyes, and life isn't fair because I'm a better fisherman than you, and I should be doing what you're doing, and I'm not. And you're like this far away from me, and it's like, or people that like love attention. I mean, and I just like to hang out with people that love to fish. If we could sit at a restaurant and have a steak dinner and talk fishing all night, and people aren't weird, that's all I'm looking for in life, And so people that are in love with themselves come and go because it's such a humbling, humiliating grind of a life that at some point there's got to be more.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have to love the industry, and you have to love the resource and just the passion of fishing. You have to be selfless.
Yeah.
And if you're only out there for yourself, because here's the other thing is that this industry, people say, it's fishing industry. It's probably as much or more about people than it is about fishing.
100%.
Yeah, right.
And so if you have no connection with people, if you have no integrity, or nobody can stand to be around you, or nobody believes what you have to say, nobody's good enough at fishing to compensate for that. Right.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you look at who would be, some of the all-time leaders, like in career earnings on the tournament side. You'd have to go to bass because it's way better than walleyes.
Yep.
You look at Kevin Van Dam. I want to say, he's maybe $5-6 million career earnings. Okay. But over a 30-year career, spending at least $200,000 a year in today's dollars.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he could have probably done almost anything and been
He
more
was a businessman,
successful.
and
It's the sponsors and the relationship, the connections he had with the public, that puts him over the top.
well, and that's the thing. I met him at the Classic, and you can walk up to Kevin Van Dam and have a conversation.
Yeah.
He'll talk to anybody.
Talk
there.
to anybody. Yeah,
I mean,
like he's in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And it's just, the one thing that sticks out to me when you say that is it's not about yourself, right? And then people might go, oh yeah, whatever. You named your TV show Jason Mitchell Outdoors. You got KVD Baits. You got, but you have to come up with something, right? And you have to come up with that thing.
Well, for sure. In hindsight, I wish I would have named it different because it's a lot harder to sell when it's called Jason Mitchell Outdoors.
Yeah.
That's what Tony Dean ran into.
Yeah, right.
And so it's like, well, I couldn't call it Tony Dean Outdoors anymore after he died.
Yeah.
What I mean?
Right.
So yeah, it's there's pros and cons to that, and then, I would say I had an established career as a fishing guide for many years up until then. So I thought, well, if I use my name, at least, I've got my people that I've got people that know who I am and stuff. But that was a mistake in hindsight.
So, I mean, yeah, you think about that, like, oh yeah, it's a mistake, but it isn't because you became a household name and it's not about you anymore because you look at that, where I was going with that comment is you look at that of you've developed so much stuff in the industry, ice fishing side, other things, and yeah, your name's on it. But it's not, you didn't develop that for you. You developed that for the audience, and you wanted to share. There's so many people out there in this, and especially in the walleye world, that want to be secretive and they don't want to talk about it. And they got this and they got that. We talk about it all the time on the show. We had Hunter Nitty on last week. He's like, oh, there's things we're doing that is a different nuance. I'm like, yes and no. I mean,
well, so here's what I'll tell you about that. I mean, I've shared everything. Maybe some things are
maybe too much.
Well, no, maybe some things weren't as valuable as I would have hoped. But, but no, I've never held information back, at least to a certain point. Like, I'm not going to tell you where I'm fishing today, right? I'll tell you where I fished yesterday. So then that way it's helpful. And you know what I mean? Like, you can always hold back some things and do it classy, right? You're not going to maybe share everything at certain times, but on the big scale, when you look at a 10,000 foot view, you have to be really open and share and help people catch fish, because that's how you make a living. And if you don't do it that way, if you try to be secretive, like, oh, this is mine, like my secret recipe for making the best chocolate chip cookies in the world, and nobody knows this but me, you know, in today's world, especially with social media, right? You get co-anglers that fish with you, you get other people that are around you that fish with you, and people talk.
Yeah.
Right. So then what happens is what you're doing slowly spreads to other people, and whoever has the best media platform cashes in, and you're stuck with nothing.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, and sometimes you'll hear that, you know, like the jigging ramp thing, when that really blew up, I don't know, was it 10, 15 years ago now? It's been a while ago now. You know, the Linders
40th
blew that
Governor's
up.
Cup.
Yeah, Linders blew that up. I mean, because they had the
Yeah.
media platform to show everybody. Everybody's like, wow, you know.
And Tyson Keller and Dewey Jelm were the guys doing it on Lake Oahe,
Yeah,
winning
there's-
tournaments
and
and
making-
not
yeah,
talking
making it
about
work.
it.
Yeah, and there's
You
other
know,
guys that were
right.
doing it in northern Minnesota and not talking about
Yeah.
it. Well, you know what? Those guys got to capitalize on that.
Yep.
You know what? Slow death is another one, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
and so you can keep things a secret, and that's fine if you don't have to pay your bills with fishing. And if you just want plaques and to win and beat your neighbor in the campground, yeah,
Great.
don't share anything. You don't have to, right? But if you're going to file tax returns every quarter and make a living, I feel like you have to be an open book, because otherwise somebody else is going to get to write that chapter and they get paid and you don't.
Well,
You know,
that's the big thing is you said it, and it makes me think like you went into the promotional side of things. You took your guide service, and you still get out there and do that stuff, but you're more promotional. You probably made a career off being promotional, not guiding.
Yeah, I mean, guiding. So we sold that business. It's probably been 10 years ago already. Maybe not that long, but it's been a while now. And so for a while, when I started doing television, I just couldn't guide anymore.
Yeah.
And some of it is, you know, I got to go to northern Wisconsin for 4 days, and I've got a bunch of stuff in the boat for fishing Sturgeon Bay for smallmouth. It's all fluorocarbon and mono, and my boat is full of, you know, stuff that I need for that. Then all of a sudden I get home at 2 a.m. and then think I got to switch everything in my boat and meet somebody at the bait shop at 7 a.m. It just, you know, like I couldn't do it justice, you know.
Yeah.
And so I realized that, you know what, I'm not the guy that I used to be if I have to roll this way. And then I got to lean on everybody that was working for me to, you know, hey, where are you fishing? Where are you doing this? Wherever. And if you're gone all the time, you know, it's great if you can call people for information, networking. But when you're gone for 4 or 5 days in a row, and they just expect everybody to, just come here and do this. And I didn't feel like that was right either. And so it just got to be where, you know, I fairly quickly, and when I got into television, we were filming so many shows, realized that, you know what, I can't be a good guide anymore. You got to be on the water every day. It's a whole different animal when you're on the water every day. And but I still ran it for quite a while. But then I realized that if I'm gone, if things happen, I need somebody around here. So then I brought in Kyle here from Woodland Resort. We were partners for, we were probably partners for 10 years on it.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, ran it. I mean, it was like, ran it like a top, and, you know, had a great staff, great team of guides. And then it just kind of got to the point where we thought, you know, we should just sell it to one of the guys we've been guiding with for years. That was Zippy. And so we sold it to Perch Patrol, ended up buying it. And I think everybody kind of walked away from that feeling pretty good. You know, I knew the customers were still going to get taken care of. I knew the guides were, that was a big worry too, is that I want to make sure that all the guides that had been working for me would continue to have, you know, good opportunities and, you know, employment and be able to make a living and stuff. And so, yeah, everything worked out pretty good. But so I haven't had my hand on guiding for, it's been a few years now, but I love doing, I always joke when I retire, I'll probably go back.
Go back to you got to admit that you really don't miss all that much, do you? Or do you?
I do. I really, well, I don't miss trying to take somebody out on a day like today. You can look outside.
Right. Yeah.
The reason we're all sitting in here is because it's 35-mile-an-hour winds, water temperatures have dropped 10 degrees. I know it'd be an absolute dogfight. Like, I don't have any answers for this. It'd be a tough day of fishing, soaking wet, cold. If you caught a handful of fish, a handful of walleyes today, you'd be doing good. And somebody that rolls in with very, very high expectations, that maybe doesn't spend a lot of time fishing, but comes from a corporate world where everything is supposed to make sense and, you know, A plus B equals C. And you're trying to explain to them that the water's dirty and it's dropped 10 degrees, and they read In Fisherman every month, so they got all the answers. And it's going
Catch might be a little titled, maybe.
I don't know. I mean, like so. Yes, to answer your question, some days were brutal, and some days were tough. But I remember a lot of good days and great days and great people. I mean, still to this day. I mean, I haven't guided in a dozen years, and you know, I go to sport shows. I run into not just a few, but lots of people that I guided over the years, and great friends and great memories. And, you know, I got to be part of stuff where guys are taking out their kids for the very first times, like the first, father-son fishing trip where they went out of state and went fishing and, and get these kids on a great bite, and it's just life changing. And I was also involved in deals where guys are taking out their dads for the last fishing trip.
Oh yeah.
And being part of that. And I just love the people and I love the challenge. Like, and I'd have to remind our guides this, one of my pet peeves is when people would complain about their clients. Like, oh, we would have come today, but my guys couldn't even catch. And those types of people didn't last long.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, just to break the news to you here, Kevin Van Dam's not going to be calling to pay you $500 a day to take you fishing. It's a deal where, it's guiding, I always tell people, like, if you're not fishing all the time, a guide is a phenomenal investment because, do I buy a $80,000 boat that's depreciating and use it 6 times? Or do I just pay a guide $500 a day? It's a way better deal.
Yeah.
Right.
And they know where the fish are. Right?
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to worry about gas, spooling up line, whatever. Like, it's a great deal for a lot of people. But
and you're just talking $80,000 boat.
Yeah.
All the other stuff that goes behind it that costs way more than $80,000 to get you there.
For sure. And so, but a lot of people that hire guides, not always, some people just want to learn. Like, they're avid anglers where they come from. But Devil's Lake, for example, is just a completely different ecosystem than, say, Southern Wisconsin, and they just want to learn. And other people, it's their trip they go on once a year or twice a year or whatever. And the same thing, like, why buy a boat when I can pay these guys, And so, but I guess the reality is that not always will people necessarily, be good at something, right? Or because they don't get a chance to do it enough, and that's fine. But I love that.
Yeah.
Like, I remember times where, like, catching fish on jigs, for example, and I could see somebody missing fish. I could just see that fish hanging on it, and they weren't maybe distinguishing the bite and trying to figure out, okay, now what do I got to do so that these people can catch fish? And then running, dropping down to a heavy bottom bouncer, and then the fish are just, gut hooking,
Yeah.
or somebody who wasn't able to cast far enough and thinking, okay, now what crankbait can I have? What angle can I get the boat where they can get in front of the fish? And I kind of like that wrinkle to it. And then the thing is, I hate to say this, but it's true. I mean, you fish every day and you get tired. Like, you get wore out. Like, by October, I could hardly stand to sit in my boat when I was guiding.
Yeah.
Okay. But, the easiest people, like frosting on the cake, easy, were guys or gals that came up that maybe they didn't get to fish very often. And they were just enough old school where catching a limit of fish was a big, big deal.
Yeah.
Like, it was important. Like I'm well beyond that. Like, I could have a great day and it isn't about catching a limit for me, but for some people it was. But I like guiding those people because it was so easy.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I got myself and 2 people in the boat. That's 3 people. I mean, I got rods sticking out like a porcupine. I mean, I'm using every rod I legally can. And, everything, 15 inches and bigger, it's a great eater, throw it in the live well. And a lot of times, you're out 4 or 5 hours and they catch their 10th fish and they're just ecstatic. Oh, wow, we got our limit. Geez, it's only 2:30. We got our limit by 2:30. Let's go into the bar. Well, I'm in air conditioning at 4 in the afternoon.
You're like, yeah,
soaking in the AC, Whereas the toughest person, like I don't know if it'd be really tough to do it every day. Is I call them the slave drivers, right? Where they don't keep a fish. Like, they fish for 4 days. They don't put a single fish in the live well, and it just like nothing's ever good enough. You go to a good spot, you torch it. There's catch 30 fish, sore mouth them, and got anything else? Kind of slow down here, or none of these are over 20 inches. Got anything bigger? And it just, well, we still got 45 minutes. We got enough time for another spot. Way over there on the other side of the lake. It's just like, which those groups were fun too, but every day it would wear you down.
Yeah.
And so when you get the limit people, it was like almost like kind of a little vacation for a few days,
So we can keep going. I've got 100 questions. We're gonna have you on another podcast because I've got one that I really want to know, but I know it's gonna take a long time to get the answer of. But Devil's Lake, the reason we're here, visit Devil's Lake for the Glow Conference. You, like I say, cut your teeth on this body of water. I mean, you grew up in Western Minnesota, Western North Dakota, but you came over here.
Yep.
Give us something insight about Devil's Lake. What made you stick like the cat? You said I was a cat. I didn't leave.
Well, so I came over here in the early 90s, and I was just old enough at that time where I saw one of the cycles on Lake Sakakawea where I fished a lot, where the water was low, then the water came up, and just how the fish responded. That flooded terrestrial vegetation, that kochia, sweet clover, that high water cycle, it just created a boom, right? And so I was just old enough where I had seen that cycle, one time in my life, and just how the fish responded to it, whether it was Lake Darling or Lake Sakakawea, on the reservoirs. And when I came over here, like the Minnewacan Flats at that time, it was like the Garden of Eden, all these trees, like thousands of trees in the water, they all had their leaves on them still because they were so freshly flooded.
Sure.
And I just remember thinking, wow, this is going to be a big deal. Like we were on the cusp of something. Like it started raining hard in 93, and that's what year I graduated. And so I think I was here full-time guiding, I want to say 95. So it was shortly after the water came up. But I just remember thinking, wow, this is a once in a generation deal. Like this is going to be a long-term. This water is going to be high for a long time, and this is going to be something, And what makes this so unique in today's world is that, back in the day when they were creating a lot of these new reservoirs like Bull Shoals, Norfolk, Lake Oahe, right? There was all that eminent domain back then where people they were creating lakes, they were creating reservoirs, and they were so fertile at the time. And then all that, biologists have a fancy word for it, but you take terrestrial vegetation or a terrestrial landscape and you flood it, it releases all the carbon. So it's like high octane rocket fuel. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's what was happening back then. Well, we'll never see that. Like we'll never see eminent domain again like that. Like we'll never see a phase in this country where we create all these lakes.
Yeah.
Right. If anything, they'll be figuring out how to restore the river environments that are native. Right. The preservation will probably be a much stronger emphasis in the future than the creation of new reservoirs that change an ecosystem on a river. So we'll never see that again. Like that's one and done, which is crazy to think about.
Right? It really is. I've never thought about it.
Well, that created the fishing industry because that changed all the habitat for largemouth bass in particular. Right. A lot of those rivers were never great bass fisheries until they created a reservoir. The Missouri River was never a walleye fishery until we changed the habitat. Right. It would have been suckers and paddlefish and sauger. Okay. Right. So what we saw here in Devil's Lake is like what made it so special is that, wow, in my lifetime, I'm seeing this in front of my face where in a world where we'll never see eminent domain again, we'll never see a new lake being created. There is one being created whether people want it or not. And it was special.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like the growth rates, the year classes of fish, it was like, wow, like I was so blown away by it. I came here and I never left. I mean, I remember, I came back, I was living in Bismarck at the time. I went back to Bismarck, and this is how, it's not like I had these big opportunities I was walking away from. I fit everything I owned into a 17-foot tiller boat in the back of a truck. And most of it was goose decoys.
The important things.
Back then, we're hunting all those magnum shells. Yeah. That took up most of the space.
That took up most of the space, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't have nothing.
Yeah, that's a good story, though. I don't think people don't get to hear that part of your story.
Well, it's and so talk about every year the lake would come up 3, 4, 5 feet and 2 feet. it just kept creeping up, and so it's just all this new water all the time. And that's one of the things we kind of figured out right away is that the new water is where the big fish were.
Sure. Yeah.
And where the most fish were. It was just from a biological thing. And what was interesting is, I was fishing every day. And there was so much I didn't know. I wish of course, I wish I knew then what I know now. I worked hard. I gave it a very strong effort. I tried to learn from my mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes. I have some groups I wish I could get another chance with, I didn't, you have to pay your dues. And, I made mistakes. I wasn't perfect. But I just remember there was just so much, it was so different than anything that anybody had ever seen with the high water where, trees in the water, bushes in the water, fish being shallow, fish really concentrating on that new water. And that was so different for a lot of people where they say spent their time fishing Cass Lake or Geneva and southern, really clear lakes with 6-pound mono and jigs and minnows. And I remember people just being livid when we're getting out on the water, and they're like, "Well, what kind of? Were you able to find any shiners?" I said, "No." What do you got for minnows? I don't. And just people just starting off the day on a really bad foot.
Yeah, sure.
Like where they came from, fishing in May without a jig and a minnow is sacrilegious.
Yeah.
Right. And then being young, where people don't give you the benefit of the doubt, you'd have to prove that you're right.
Yeah.
Like they would not just assume that you knew anything because they're 60 and you're 20. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like I had to work twice as hard. And there was one really good guide on the lake at the time named Mike Shell's, nicknamed Spider. And so he kind of took me under his wing. I always felt like I was running next to a thoroughbred where I was on a donkey. My legs had to move twice as fast just to try to keep up with him. He was so good at fishing Devil's Lake. And then, in the wintertime, hooking up with the Perch Patrol guys. And, again, those guys are so good I was able to absorb everything and try to learn as much as I could from, guys who've been on the water a lot. But I remember some of the guys in town, the older guys, they were, some of people were, and not everybody's friendly in this world, right?
Yeah.
You want to get in a down and out mood, just hang out in some of the bars where everybody's complaining about this, complaining about that. And things that get back to me where guys are, complaining about, oh, I shouldn't be taking people fishing, didn't know the lake, and I'm not even from here, and all this kind of stuff. And one of the things that I did that really put me over the top, I feel like, was back in the day, there wasn't any Google Earth or anything like. It wasn't even any good maps of the lake because the lake had changed.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
All the lakes are old, and the names weren't even like the local names, and a lot of the places didn't even have names. And so there was a website at the time that had aerial photography where you go back to like the 70s and 60s. Yeah. And so I would go, and it was called terraserver.com. I'll never forget this. Okay. Yeah. So I would go on this website and I would sit there for hours and I would move the crosshairs around and I would write down the latitude and I'd write down the longitude. I'd outline every old cattail slough with the cattails when they were 8 feet of water on them, held a lot of fish.
Yeah, right. Stock dams.
Stock dams, like corner of fields. He's like, those white specks, that's got to be a rock. So I'd write that down. Then I would sit there and plug them into my GPS. Well, I had thousands of waypoints like on the Minnewacan Flats and, areas that were new water. And so I'm fishing all these really cool spots that were loaded with fish. Like I remember anchoring on some of those stock dams on the berm, in some of those spots for the first time. And, it realistically, like nobody had ever fished them before.
Yeah, right. It was all new territory.
Yeah, it was. And people were just like, how are you finding these spots? And that's one thing I never said. I never told. That was my secret. Anybody would know.
But I mean, it was though. I learned about that from a DOT guy. He's like, "Hey, you want to fish? Check this out."
Yeah, I mean, same thing in eastern South Dakota. I mean,
yeah.
And so, like, I was able to find such cool spots, and so,
the dedication and hours of time to get that
what
done.
happened was the lake changed so much that the old timers, I didn't say old timers, the guys that had a lot of history on Devil's Lake, they had their spots, but now those spots were 30 feet deep. They were the rocks changed where they were silting in, and the lake changed so much where you had to fish that new water. That was so important. It's like the fish just gravitated towards that, And so talk about a lot of fun. And then we came up with a map, and goodness, we sold thousands of them right away. I mean, that was my first little side hustle. Selling maps at Devil's Lake. Like a tournament would come to town, I'd say,
Sit there on the back of your car peddling maps.
I would go from every bait shop and deliver them. And I had a partner that would laminate them and all that stuff. And like a lot of the spots didn't even have names, and so some of them we named and never thought in a million years of names would stick. Like the Golden Highway. Spider named that one summer. We were trolling it so much and just. Like Golden Highway paved with walleyes and pike.
That's awesome. That's a cool little tidbit to know how I got it.
So, like, who'd ever thought the biggest community spot back then was like at that time it was covered in 4 feet of water, 5 feet of water, and people were terrified of going west of Zebox Pass because of all the trees.
Yeah, right.
And people were like, oh, there's tractors that hit, and there's this to hit, and all this stuff underwater. But people were terrified. And there was a lot of stuff to hit, but. And then back then, people didn't have mapping on their GPS. And so we'd be trolling, they'd see a net of fish, or they would come across that road and hit it, like the other, the
we were just talking about the train tracks last night.
Yeah. And so, back then it wasn't a secret spot or a community spot. It was just, you know, lots changed.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the Seabach Pass was just this little narrow area
Oh yeah.
that you could, if I remember right, at one point when I was a kid, we walked. I don't think we walked across it.
Well, you
But
could have.
you know,
Yeah, there was a
you
road.
could walk out quite a ways, and
Yeah.
I think maybe we were just scared that it'd drop off or something.
Well, it does drop off.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
But yeah, it used to be a pass. Guys would shoot bluebills through there.
right.
Ducks.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, we got to get to the next thing. I got a text saying we got to go.
All right.
But,
Okay.
I appreciate you
Time flies.
taking your time out and coming to see us. And like I said, we're going to have another podcast
Yeah,
with
for
you
sure.
because I would love to know the story behind you getting in with Tony Dean and the whole
Oh,
that
yeah.
whole era.
Yeah.
And I said I don't want to ask that because we're going to open a ball of wax
Yeah,
and we're
for
going to be here for a while because being a Pier boy myself and knowing that in South Dakota boy,
Yeah.
knowing every Sunday night after, I'll never forget it, the Kettleland News, and they go, guess why Motors Millbank, South Dakota, it's worth the drive. Tony Dean came on.
Dean.
And that's a ingrained memory in my childhood, and I'll never forget that. And Craig, how are you?
Oiler.
We want to make sure we get on and get that story because
Yeah, sure.
I would love to hear that whole story behind you getting in with Tony D and doing that stuff. But we got to get to lunch with Visit Devil's Lake and go check some stuff out. So we'll be back after lunch, probably do some sightseeing because we can't fish.
No, we can't.
Hopefully tomorrow. Maybe we'll get out and shore fish later this afternoon in our rain gear. But
We lucked out though because the weather is a little bit icky. I sent Jason a text, and all of a sudden, boom! We're just looking for a picture, and he's here. So thank you for answering and being willing to play along with us.
Thank
Appreciate
you. I mean, I wasn't getting much done today, so I figured.
it. That's good. That's
we
good.
appreciate you.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
And thanks for coming out. You better take us out, Brian.
All right, thank
All
you.
right.